All right. So today we speak with Ani Davi. She's the VP of Experience at Enclave Key. We previously interviewed Blake, the CEO of Enclave Key. Enclave Key is in the business of building experiences, both digitally and in real life, with focus on creative and community building. So welcome to the show, Ani.
Yeah, happy to be here. This is gonna be real fun.
Yeah, and we've been trying to talk more with folks like that are actually out on the field, both from the strategic side, understand both back of house and front of house. So we're really excited to have a chance to chat with you. So we'll kind of kick it off and start with, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you found your way to Enclave Key and maybe a little bit on your role as a VP of Experience.
It's actually a really funny story. It was right in the middle of COVID, and I'm a law student. So for one of my classes, I needed a internship, and I could not find an internship to save my life. Like COVID had just started. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sitting like on my bed in the middle of my room, and I'm having a minor freak out. And out of nowhere, I get a text from one of my friends, and they're like, hey, I work at this sports marketing agency. Do you want to like do an internship here? Yeah, I'll take it. Like I'll do whatever I can at this point. There's literally nothing else available. So I do a 6-week internship, get the credit for class, and that turns into me becoming the director of business development. From there, I moved on to head of talent. So I managed a lot of the talent. That was like where I first saw my interest in the marketing world. I love the interaction between an influencer and brand and helping brands tell that story. And then from there, I went to VP of Experience, and I just increased the quantity of stories I get to tell through brands and talent that we work with.
I love that. Very serendipitous. So what class was it that you needed the internship? Was it a general law internship or?
Yeah, it was like a business law class that I just needed a random internship for. And I emailed my professor immediately as soon as I got hired. Hey, I know this needs to be like something in like the legal field, but is it okay if like we just make one little exception? I was originally going to go into a paralegal office and kind of see where I can figure out my situation there. He was like, yeah, you know what? Like we're all going through it right now. So I'm not even going to worry about it. Like you just do what you need to do. So
Yeah. And I guess what really maybe stood out for you in the beginning that made you say, hey, this is a lane that I'm going to pursue?
I would say I'm merging just because a lot of what I do deals with contracts, and I'm an individual that likes to be competent and understand what I'm reading.
Mhm.
So with kind of creating these deals for talent, there is a lot of legal writing that you have to be mindful of and understand. So definitely a merge. I think if I were to tell my parents that I'm not doing law school, I would be shunned. So that won't be great. But yeah, it is definitely a merge. It is definitely a merge. And I just love the creative of what Enclave gives me. And I think it's a good outlet for me to just expand on and keep growing.
Yeah. And I mean, I've always kind of found that, I have a couple mentors and friends that went to law school, and a few of them did practice and a lot of them didn't. But just having that sort of framework of critical thinking that law is required, and like anything that is just tedious research, tedious reading paired with strategy, it's almost like it develops a sort of different creative brain. So, I mean, I see them succeed in business, obviously in venture capital, in anything that is even like random arts. Like I have a buddy who studied law and randomly got into pottery. He was like an art collector for a while and got into pottery, and he thinks about concepts like something unrelated like pottery and design with this sort of tactical, I don't know, there's something special about that mindset. It's problem solving, yet creative, yet there are structures like case law. So
Yeah.
do you have a kind of go-to way of nurturing creativity in your role as VP? Does any of that stem from what you could draw on your schooling from law or anything else? What inspires you, and how do you kind of continue that creative muscle?
Ooh, what inspires me? I think it's that for me is kind of a loaded question, because I think what inspires me is not a traditional answer in the sense that I inspire myself. I come from a background of my parents are hard workers, my siblings are hard workers, and I always want to be like the better of everyone. And I think like my drive inspires me. And honestly, self-motivation is like the biggest inspiring factor that I think I personally have. And just knowing that I have like an outlet to use that and make sure something is successful, like that inspires me. I love the concept of I'm going to host an event, right, for X company. Amazing event, had an amazing turnout, great press behind it, but now I can do better. And I think that hunger for doing better is like my inspiring.
I love that. With Blake and a couple of, I think Blake was the only Vegas native, but I think a lot of the West Coast energy, I'm not even going to say West Coast, just Vegas in general has this like hustler spirit. And so when we were talking previously on the call, like that sort of drive that we have as children of immigrants or immigrants ourselves is a very like naturally ambitious mindset. But then pair it with the hustle of Vegas, like there is this sort of different breed that is definitely, I could see as a good spring of inspiration. Is there like things that you draw from the city that like you've looked at, obviously working with Blake and kind of the legacy that is, the wins, the Vegas Strip, now with different projects like F1 and just what always kind of happens in Vegas that gets reinvented, that gets really like the showmanship out there. Are there any either locations or experiences from the city that you draw on as constant inspiration, or it's more like fully within?
Yeah, actually, weirdly enough, like I draw a lot of inspiration from the Bellagio fountains, right? Like you would never expect to be that big of a water show, or that like no one expects water to be in the desert. Like it's currently 14 degrees here right now. Like when it's dry, no one expects to come to Vegas and see this immaculate experience of these hundreds of fountains doing its own choreography to Frank Sinatra's music or your latest favorite artist's music. So I think that is one of the biggest inspiring things. I love driving down the strip and knowing as Vegas, like we were originally a mining town. And since then, like we've built this industry on tourism, and we've built so much from when the Hoover Dam was created, and just the buildings and architecture are very inspiring.
That's true. One of the craziest things for me, like driving back in like Vegas highways, even just obviously the desert has its own kind of energy, the strip has its own energy, but yeah, there's something different in the city that is undeniable. I guess let's spin it a little bit and go into maybe some of your projects. Like what have been some of your favorite projects with Enclave, or maybe even some of the most valuable lessons? Obviously, as you mentioned, like that ability or that opportunity to level up after you've done something is always great. So one, what is maybe some of your best projects or favorite projects and why? And two, what are some of the takeaways either from wins or mistakes or growth processes within those?
Yeah, I'd say my favorite project that we're working on currently is our partnership with Luxury Lifestyle magazine. So essentially we select their cover stars, and we do 2 cover star features a month where we'll do a whole story on the talent selected. We'll do an event in honor of their feature. And then we bring out and cultivate a room of change makers and people who have a voice in the industry that talent is in, right? So I think my favorite part of that is creating that room, is creating the ambiance and knowing that every guest attending is touching an item that you've put your heart into, is looking at something that took maybe 20 minutes, but also could have taken 20 hours. But just making sure everything is perfect and down to the detail is one of my favorite parts, and is something that I love in like our partnership with Luxury Lifestyle. A takeaway I would say is you're going to make mistakes. It's okay, but just learn from it and move on. I am the biggest advocate for, you know what, you made a mistake, amazing. Learn from it and let's not harp on it. Not everything needs to be a 40-minute debate within yourself. I think sometimes you just need to pick up, move on, keep your head up and just move forward, because that's the only way you can get through it.
That is massive. I think with any creative, especially in entrepreneurship, like it's so cliche, the whole fail fast, but it took me a while to like really, really understand it. And, as you bring that up, for me, what comes up is just that idea of like the lessons that we want to get some return on, right? So there's that story of like, some exec that cost the company like $10 million. And so he's going to walk in and like, hey, I know you're going to fire me. Here's my notice. He's like, why would I fire you? I just paid $10 million to teach you a lesson, right? Like that idea of like kind of using them, as you said, like we're human, we're going to make mistakes. And another thing that I love about that approach that has been really, I think, useful for me lately is the 1 Minute Manager. Have you read that book?
No.
So highly recommended. There's the approach of like the 1 minute reprimand and the 1 minute praise. And in theory, it's just like as we make mistakes, as we thrive and succeed, the manager, and it's a thought process. So you as a manager managing teams, managing vendors, but you as an individual managing yourself too, can in 1 minute properly either call out the mistake as a behavioral thing. So this thing did a thing, I messed up here, and it's the behavior that is corrected. And vice versa with the praise, this person did this, it was great, and kind of like sitting with it. And so for me, that's been an approach that, you know, has really helped because it separates the activity, the behavior from the person, which oftentimes, you know, we're dealing with clients and with people, egos and energy and all of that, you know, we're oftentimes tired and high pressure situations. So if you separate this activity from the event or from the person, you see like almost an instant like feedback effect, both from the praise and the reprimand.
100%. I honestly couldn't agree more. I think it's also interesting because when I approach, let's say something has happened, right? Within what a vendor has messed something up. In that moment, you can't necessarily get mad at the vendor. Sure, that might be your first initial reaction, but you have to be in go mode and be ready to fix any problem. And it's just knowing that you have those problem solving capabilities is, I think, the most number one skill any human being can have is be quick and just move efficiently and you'll be good.
Yeah. And I've had a lot of that. So true. And a lot of that comes from maybe like immigrant mindset too, because it's like, again, you'll be disowned if you mess up, or like, you know what we had to do to get here. But also back to like critical thinking and law school, or just in any sort of craft where, especially today's day and age, like it can be a pretty rare thing for individuals to critically think. And as you said, like we're problem solvers. So like that really, I love how that example ignites that idea of critical thinking.
100%. Yeah.
So now tell me, as far as like a lot of the clients you work with are in sports, do you notice anything unique about either the culture, the environment, or any questions that constantly pop up that you observe from your personal perspective that you think maybe others miss, being a young female or just being in Vegas, back to kind of like the energy of Sin City, anything that pops out that you pick up on?
So it's actually really funny because initially when I first started at Enclave, I don't know anything about sports. I can tell you maybe like the basic rules of football and basketball. And I had like this internalized fear of I'm going to meet an athlete and they're going to talk only about sports. They're going to talk about what they do. And it took until meeting my first like influencer, my first athlete, where I was like, oh, these are regular people. They don't want to talk about work. Just like when we leave the office, we don't want to talk about work. Like the court is their office or the field is their office. So yeah, that was a really cool, like kind of self-realization. Okay, these are regular people. I'm going to tone it down. Maybe I should like do some research on how like the games are played, but like it's an easy transition into knowing that they're real people.
That's so true. And to me, that's why a lot of, I think the most successful leaders in our space, in events and in the agency world are female. And I've had a conversation with past guests before where even if it's a male, that feminine, empathetic approach, which again, for whatever reason, maybe comes more naturally to the female element, but any of us can embody that abilities. And again, that's kind of, I talked with Blake about this, the dark side of Vegas, because it's go, 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 because it's all of that. Sometimes there's this very through line of not seeing humans as humans. And so when you come in, just like the critical thinking bit, you're like, the bar is kind of low. And even obviously, if you are in a new role or trying to figure out how do I interact with athletes not knowing about sports, it takes this sort of, I think, self-awareness that is innately, like, I don't even want to say feminine, but it's innately just like intuitive. Is that something that you picked up on? Like, is that something that you see as like a thing, or am I just kind of making it up?
You're onto something there. I think it's, I don't know. I do think it's nurturing, but I think it's like I said, it's that stepping outside of the office mentality where no one wants to just only talk about business 24/7. A lot of the times when I meet athletes or if I meet influencers, it's, hey, like, where'd you get that top? That's so cute. And then we go into a 20-minute about combo about fashion, or, hey, how are your kids doing? You know, it's just having that one-to-one connection, because they already have the one to millions of connections through your social media and Instagram and any post that they do. But it's kind of breaking that barrier where I think it's like, okay, this is one-to-one now. And who doesn't love talking about themselves and learning about the person that they're talking to?
So true. So true. So last question, when it comes to experience strategy. So obviously within our world, as we mentioned, we're both the executioners sometimes, as well as, we do it all. But there's also the tactical side, the creative, like more strategic side. Are there any thoughts or approaches or best practices that you use? And are there maybe any example of scenarios that help you deliver the most value for clients?
Yeah. First advice, make a spreadsheet. I make a spreadsheet for everything. I love to itemize things down to, if I need black cocktail napkins, I will make sure that is written down. I will have a quantity. Spreadsheets are your lifesaver. You want to use any other system, go for it. But just knowing you have like something you can refer back to. And yeah, like I think making sure your guests are happy and feel an intimate setting, because you can of course have a 200-person event, but knowing that intimacy is at the forefront of the event, and knowing at least like one person is going away from your event and saying, man, you know what? Like I felt that touch that they did there, or I felt like this activation was a very personal activation that I can relate to. So just making sure intimacy is a part of your phase, is best phase.
I love. So I'll run it back and just kind of you fill in any takeaways that I'm missing. So starting from the end, maybe having some sort of tool like a Excel sheet or spreadsheet is very, very attorney of you. But yeah, in general, just having some sort of tool for catching things that in execution we could miss, right? As well as maybe looking at to kind of the more strategic approach, how can you implement some sense of that one-to-one human connection within the event? And then the people element, whether we're working with our clients or influencers, having some sort of recognition, maybe from like that nourishing sense of, hey, this is a human to human, and that is the best way that we can connect, whether it's at mass, that scale, I should say, or with an individual, that being one of the most maybe ROI providing engagements, getting ROI from your mistakes. Again, if anything is ever, goes awry, or if anything happens as is natural in the events world, being a human, making sure that you see it again as an opportunity, and the attention to detail to those things that will help you, put it together. And then getting inspiration from your environment. I really like what you added at the beginning of, you can kind of be the source of that inspo in a world where we're so dependent on, the feed, validation. Like I think it's a very powerful tool and very much maybe a secret weapon of yours, but something that we could all be inspired by to draw inspo from within us, because who else is going to be there besides us? So I love that. Is there any other bit that you would add, any other takeaways from our chat?
For the last bit of a tool that you can use, I would honestly say a second pair of eyes. I think you should always run a concept by someone, whether that's an assistant, a team member, your mom, your dad, whoever it is. Just someone that you trust and is going to give you an honest answer can make or break the concept, right? If you share it and their first immediate reaction is, I don't get it, why would you do that? And there's a slew of questions. Maybe let's take it back to the drawing room. Let's reevaluate and make it something that is digestible, rather than, okay, like, sure, love this idea, we do it, and it's not a hit.
That's a huge one. No, I really like that, especially because as we see with clients, oftentimes, like, some of these people are experts, they have teams, but sometimes they're even too close to it, right? So definitely if they rely and, pay good money or trust in our ability to be that for them, why wouldn't we individually or as a company or in a project get that second pair of eyes? So that's huge. Thank you so much, Ani. Is there any, as far as like where we could find more about you, anything you have going on, anything you'd like to plug in.
So you guys can find me on Instagram at it's Ani Davi, LinkedIn, Ani Davi. So I do use my full last name for that. And on Enclave socials, we have a lot of exciting events coming up and a lot of exciting projects coming up. So would love for you guys to check it out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ani. Appreciate you jumping on, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you.